Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. I hope everything is good with you, and I'm big time grateful that you're tuning in. Today we're continuing onward. We have our Ringo Starr's All-Star Band series we've been doing, their Asia-Pacific series, and our guest today, a talented, well-liked multi-instrumentalist. His work has been part of Foreigner, Peter Gabriel's band, Billy Joel's group. His horn work is legendary. Even John Lennon. I think he may have done that work with our buddy Vinny Appice. We'll ask in a second when we bring him in. He's got a solo effort we're going to be hearing about. One tune out already. We'll find out more about the project, which I believe includes both Ringo and Billy Joel. Hear about his involvement with the 12-12-12 benefit show. And he's not just a part of Ringo Starr's All-Star Band, singing and doing a variety of instruments. He's the band's music director, so he can provide insight like no one else. I believe he's done 7 or 8 editions. It's a great pleasure to welcome Mark Rivera to the show. Aloha and mahalo, my brother. How you doing?
Mahalo, my brother Dave. Very well, thank you. And you?
I'm awesome. Thank you for asking. And Mark's easy to talk to. He's got that real down-home New York thing. And me being a Philly boy, it's easy to just...
I love Philadelphia. I really do. It's easily, people always ask me what my favorite city in the States to play is. I think they expect me to say New York or California. I say Philadelphia, hands down.
Why is that?
If they love you in Philly, they love you. If they don't, they hate you. But they love me there with from Billy. And actually, I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name who broke Billy, a DJ out of Philadelphia. And Ed Shockey.
Oh, Ed Shockey. The legendary Ed Shockey. I remember him.
Yeah, buddy. See, I'm bringing it back. Yeah, Ed Shockey, when everybody thought Billy was not happening, Ed just played his record over and over and literally broke them out of Philly. And Billy's connection to that town has been powerful. And if you don't tell everybody, I happen to be a Flyers fan. So
we'll keep that between us.
Yeah, but no, Philadelphia's a great, great town. I love Philly. So we have this. They say you could take the boy out of Brooklyn, but you can't take the Brooklyn out of the boy. So that's how it is.
They go together real well in New York and Philly. It does. It's not like Boston and Philly, which has a
no. Or Boston and New York for that matter. That's like oil and water.
Right. That's actually what I meant to say. What I meant to say was Boston and New York.
Boston. Oh boy, that's tough. That's a tough combination.
That's what I was thinking in my head. But sometimes the synapses don't line it up. So before we get into the fun and games with Ringo, I just want to dive into this common bond. I see all the stuff online, but I just see Turn Me Loose as released so far. Fill us in on this thing.
Well, Turn Me Loose is the first single, and I want to get it out a lot sooner than it's going to be done, but a mixed blessing is that I've been very, very busy between Ringo went back out, and I did some stuff with Billy, and I've done a lot of corporate dates. Long story short, I want to get it right. And in the interim, I had the good fortune of having some more friends play on the CD. Billy Joel actually plays a Hammond B3 on a cover of Jimi Hendrix's Spanish Castle Magic.
Wow.
Got Will Lee playing bass on a track with Ringo. Nils Lofgren's on the record, and just last week, Steve Lukather that played a solo on the closing song in the record called Rise, and just a joy. I mean, I love Luke, and I guess sometimes if you take your time, it just comes out better. It's like a sauce. You should never rush the sauce when you make it. Stir it slowly. So
that's a great analogy.
A lot of great music. If I could, say that, very much a part of it in the title. Is just me going back to my real roots. I'm a huge, huge fan of Traffic, Hendrix, obviously the Beatles, all that great music, the Animals, and a lot of it's, everybody expected me to come out with a smooth jazz album. They expect me to sound like, like Dave Cobb or something. No, man, that's not where I came from. And it's pretty hard rock and roll. I mean, people who've heard it said it sounds like a cross between Hendrix, Sly, or Lenny Kravitz or something, and I'm very pleased with any of that. My roots are always in R&B and soul and rock and roll, so I can't be happier with that company.
When it came to the material that we're going to be fortunate enough to get on this thing, was it assembled over a series of different points in your life? Talk about the catalog of songs that are included.
Well, one of the tunes is about 18 years old. When I played the horns on Sledgehammer, I had the good fortune of, working with Peter Gabriel, who's one of my all-time favorites. And, he plays Sledgehammer. Okay, that's a great track. And I got deeper and deeper into his music. And this one track called Hard to Let Go was just something that I, at the time, wanted it to be a Peter Gabriel track, but it ended up being more like, kind of went to Philly a little bit, to tell you the truth. And it's kind of like just a soulful feel to it. In fact, Nils Lofgren played guitar. He played a solo on that as well. So it's just a collection of songs. Some of them were written in the last 2 years. A couple of them were finished up in the last 2 weeks. So it's been an ongoing process, and I'm not ashamed to say that it's taken a long, long time. But as I mentioned before, it's been a labor of love. And my producer, Jimmy Braylauer, who's got a track record, it's incredible the work he's done. He said, Mark, especially once Ringo played on the record, he goes, buddy, he just raised the bar. We can't be pushing this out to Christmas help. We have to do this right. And that's where we're at right now.
That sounds like great advice, and I also, in addition to the Ringo track being an exciting thing to listen for and hear, plus so many different interesting guests that you've assembled and the variety of flavors that I know many of those folks are talented and able to bring to the table, that Billy Joel on the Hammond B3, when did you record that? I know that had to be special because he's your boy.
Yeah, well, he's a very dear friend, and we actually did that about a year ago, believe it or not. That's how long this process has been. About a year ago, Billy was getting ready to leave to go to Florida because he spends his January and February down in Florida, keeps warm, plays on his boats, which God bless him, he can do. And I saw him, unfortunately, we were at a memorial for a very dear friend who passed, Don DeVito. He was a big man at Sony, back in the day. Sony was CBS Columbia Records. And Don DeVito never gave up on Billy. He also was instrumental in Bob Dylan's career. And unfortunately, he passed away, and Billy and I ran into each other. I talked Billy into playing a song he and I did, Miami 2017, at the memorial service, and he hugged me and said, thank you so much for making me play, because I was just going to talk. He goes, man, I really owe you. And I kind of took a moment and said, well, actually, Billy, I have a favor. And he said, what's that? And, everybody goes up to Billy would ask him to play piano. And I know Billy from the day of the Hassles when he was he's a killer Hammond B3 player. So I said, Billy, would you do me the honor of playing a Hammond B3 solo on Jimi Hendrix's Spanish Castle Magic? And he immediately got into this animation of putting his hands on the keyboard and freaking out. He says, yeah, man, when is it? So we hooked that up about a year ago. And again, he threw down, and it no longer became just an organ solo. So then I had to do something. So then I ended up playing a Barry sax solo after that. So it's crazy. I mean, the Barry sax at the end of it, rather. It's just crazy how this whole thing just keeps, as Jimmy said, the bar gets risen. You can't play the old rules are all thrown away, and you have to rise to the occasion. And the more I do this, the more I realize you don't send second string guys in. You don't send this is my shot and I want to make it great. And I've been very blessed to have the people around me that have, as I said, thrown down and raised the bar.
Oh, it's outstanding. And on that sort of note, and we'll get back to the record, actually, because I have something else I wanted to ask you about. But on that sort of note, and these cats that you've assembled, your first Beatles experience, the nature of what you're embarking on, very special, and special within the band. Not just special for you to get to do, but it's also a special role inside the band as it relates to music. Take me to your first personal Beatles experience, meaning when you were a little kid, they could have been on TV. Record, something.
There's no doubt about it. How does February? I think it's February 9th, let me get the date right. 64. I was 11 years old. I was just before I was 11. I was 11 that May. My Aunt Iris, P.T. Iris, said, "I'm going to take you out and buy your a record." She bought me Meet the Beatles, and she knew that they were going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show that night. And I really wasn't infected by them as of yet, so she made me listen to the whole first side of the record, and I was just really into it. And then at my abuela's house, we watched the Ed Sullivan Show. And in my bio, it says that was the pivotal moment in my life. I saw them. I wanted to be John or Paul, plain and simple. It was the die was cast. It was the greatest single moment of my life. Obviously, it just changed everything. And I believe they did a study. They said prior to that they were selling maybe a couple hundred guitars a month or something. It exploded. They sold hundreds of thousands of guitars right after that. And the whole world, I mean, the whole our entire culture, I'm sure I'm not saying anything you haven't heard, but our entire culture was like turned upside down. Everything that we knew prior to that was out the window, in a good way. And it was also this wonderful time. They came in and repainted or re-landscaped the world we lived in. That was the first experience, and how about that for remembering it?
That is a great detail that you provide, and it's a wonderful point that you mentioned, because there are a lot of ways to look at what they did with pop culture, but the impact on people buying guitars, that's a whole different thing that I've never heard anyone mention. So, and you're right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I can imagine that. So flashing to being a fan and having it affect you in such a remarkable way, to actually, as a musician, getting to work with folks, was your mid-'70s experience with John Lennon your first time meeting any Beatle? And did that adventure include our friend Vinny Appice, like I mentioned also?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. In fact, Vinny and I played in bands, again, going back to when I was like 14. We'd sneak downstairs. When Carmine played with Beck, Bogart, and Appice, Jeff Beck used to rehearse downstairs in Vinny's basement. And we'd be there, we look at like we were like kids, and it was Jeff Beck. It was insane. So Vinny and I did play in a band called it was originally called Community Apple, and it was Bombs, and had all these different names. But we had a 7 or 8 piece band. We backed John the track for a tribute to Sir Lou Grade, and quite frankly, we were all stunned to first meet John. But the thing that I think I find with John and consequently with my relationship with Ringo, they're the most engaging people. And for people who have this incredible, just their pedigree and who they are, none of that gets in the way of any conversation you'll ever have with them. They're so engaging, and they're incredibly open. And he just made me feel really calm. I was talking to friends as I'm doing the sound check and stuff. I'm like, man, it's freaking John Lennon, blah, blah, blah. He said, how do you even speak? I said, it's easy. He just makes us feel like his friend. And he really did. I mean, to think that in itself was mind-boggling.
The story, I've been fortunate for 10 years of doing radio here. I gotten to know Carmine and Vinny really well, and had them both on the show bunches of times. And I love the guy a bunch. And one of the things Vinny was telling me about was the unique story of how you were at the record plant and how you guys met John.
I came on into the band later. They were already working with John. They were doing Walls and Bridges they had done. They got John Colbert, my friend John, and Vinny did hand claps and did some backing vocals on the records. I came in quite a bit later, so I wasn't there for the initial. I have trouble commenting on that initial introduction.
How did you get introduced to it? Talk about how you got the gig and your first time meeting John.
Well, I got the gig because they replaced the saxophone player in the band that I was in, and we were rehearsing, we were playing, and we were cutting a record with the owner of the record plant at the time, Roy Sakala. And all of a sudden, John was in there. John was always up there with another very dear friend of mine from Brooklyn, New York, Jimmy Iovine, who's now like the mogul of moguls. He and I used to play in rival bands. We played battles of bands when we were like 15 years old.
That's incredible.
Jimmy and Jimmy was, he started out as a tape op. He started out as like an assistant to Roy, and he had a great personality. He's really vivacious, and John loved him. One day, Roy said, just have Jimmy run the console. So Jimmy gets the gig. He's recording with John Lennon. I'm thinking, geez, Jimmy Iovine is recording John Lennon. And it was just insane. And it was right around the time, if I remember right, that he'd gotten a gig to do Springsteen as well. So it's all this insane history going on. So I get called in, hey, by the way, John wants to use horns on this thing. He's producing a record for, my first encounter was he was producing a record for Gary U.S. Bonds. Wow. And he wanted to put the horn section together. So I'm playing in the studio, and on the other side of the glass is John Lennon. I'm like, it was like surreal. And I don't even know what became of the record, but I know I was recording with John. And then he liked the guys. He said, well, I'm going to do this thing with Sir Lou Graydon. We'd love to have you play. And again, he's just like talking to somebody he made me feel like I knew him for years. And I'd met him like in a 2-hour period. We were, I can't throw it around lightly, but he made me feel like a friend. And it's just an incredible, he had an incredible ability. He's very funny, very witty, very, just extremely in the moment. And that always blew my mind. I mean, obviously, the way he wrote his lyric is just, again, just like a painting. It's just like anytime you hear a Beatles song, I don't know about you, but I hear a Beatles song and I'm thrust right back to a girlfriend that I was with, those buddies that I was hanging out with at a park or whatever, the song that came on. I remember We Can Work It Out in particular. I was holding the transistor radio to my ear and I cut school that day. Don't let this get out. I cut school that day and I'm on a bus and listening to We Can Work It Out thinking, how do you write songs like that? How did he know what I was thinking? How did they know? We Could Work It Out. I was having a girl, I might have been like a 12 or 13, and a girl that I liked didn't like me or something. How did they know what I was going through? And that's like his world was conversational. It was brilliant.
That's great that you were able to connect on a very down-to-earth way like you've described, too, that you were able to really just talk to him and have him appreciate your playing. Is there a particular experience now that you've had the rest of the career that you've had? Is there an experience with him that more sticks out, maybe in a lesson you got from working around John Lennon?
Well, just listen, because anybody can come up with a great idea. He was a master at, like, not letting anything go by without, really figuring the value of the moment. Anything any one of us might have said or done, he was like, the antenna was up and the receptors were really focused. So if there's anything I could say that I remember, was just that nothing went by that he wasn't aware of. And I try to be that way on stage or when when you talk to people, the most important thing you could do when you talk, outside of me doing this interview and talking a lot, the most important thing you can do is listen. And he really made me aware that he was just an incredibly sensitive human being. And that's something I'll never forget. He sounded like he really cared. And that's something you have to do in all facets of life. If you can sit down and say, hey, man, talk to me, and take the moment and listen to what the person has to say or what the person has to play, that's a gift. That really is a gift.
It's fantastic you've been able to incorporate some of those lessons into the rest of your life like that, and that you can remember it so clearly. After the work with him, what was the next encounter with the Beatles on the road to Ringo, as we say?
The next time, if I remember, I got to get my chronology straight. No, serious, because fast forward. I don't remember if I met Paul when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I believe that was the case, because that was about 18 years ago. I have to get it straight, and I hadn't worked with Ringo until like the following year. And I got to meet Paul, and it was just like, again, you can't breathe for a minute. And I guess, because as time went on and I, became more and more of a fan and more appreciative of what they did. When I met John, I think I was like 22. So I was kind of like, thinking like, hey, this is part of what life is. And all of a sudden you fast forward, you're like 32, and you realize it's not, this is like, you're very blessed to have these paths crossing.
Right.
And when I got to meet Paul, it was just, again, awestruck and the whole thing. And then Billy and Paul were really good friends. I'm thinking, this guy is my boss's friend. And it's like, wow. It's like, I was like that 6 Degrees. I was a Kevin Bacon for a moment, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And I was connected to Paul McCartney through that. And that lasted for quite a while, because we'd done another thing with Paul and Billy, another, I don't know if it was a Hall of Fame or something. But then fast forward to working with Ringo, Clarence couldn't do one of the tours, and they asked me to come join Ringo's band. And at the time, it was Zach Starkey, John Entwistle, Felix Cavalieri, Mark Farner, Randy Bachman, and Billy Preston, who I adored. And at the time, I won't mention any names, but one of them was the musical director. And Ringo would ask a couple of questions, and he'd shrug his shoulders. I don't know. And I'd grown up playing in bars, all the Grand Funk Railroad stuff, all the Rascal stuff, everybody's music. I grew up. I playing My Generation when I was like 14. So I knew all the background harmonies. I knew all the chords. So at one point, Ringo turned to me, or whoever was asking the question, and he had his arms folded. He goes, "Just ask Mark. He knows everything." So by default, I became the musical director of that tour. And subsequently, anytime he put a band together, he would call me to be the MD. And it was like, there was actually a couple of tours that I couldn't do physically because Billy was out, and I thought, I really didn't want to burn my bridge with Ringo. And I called him directly. I said, Ringo, I can't make it out this time. I'm really sorry. And he says, we're musicians. You got to do what you got to do. And there's like this pregnant pause, and I'm like, I hope he doesn't say he's never going to talk to me again. And he says, but you're all going to come out and whip the band in shape for me, right? I'm like, there is a God.
Wow.
Because after telling him I couldn't do a gig that was only like a couple of months away, instead of him saying, you really put me in a crap position, he asked me to whip his band in shape. And I was never so blown away and so humbled. Because, you always think you have a relationship with somebody, but when the rubber meets the road, or when the what hits the fan, that's the first time you get the sense of how important or how close you are to somebody. And he just made me feel incredibly special, like that I really was a part of this whole process. And to this day, he calls the house, and we hang out, and it's just an amazing relationship.
What a lucky guy!
I get paid to tell Beatles that they're wrong. I'll tell you, if you don't mind, one more quick story, a Paul story.
Please, I want to hear it.
For Ringo's 70th birthday, Joe Walsh calls me up and says, "Hey, Mark, how you doing, man? We're gonna play Paul." He goes, "You know Paul?" I'm like, "Yeah, Joe, I know Paul." Yeah. He said, "Paul wants to put a band together. I think you should put the band together. We're going to sing Birthday at Ringo's birthday at Radio City, but he doesn't know we're doing it." So we had to go in 2 hours before sound check. So it's myself, Rick Derringer, Edgar Winter, Greg Bissonette, Paul McCartney, and Joe Walsh. 2 in the afternoon before Ringo gets to rehearsal. We're running through Birthday, and Paul hadn't played Birthday in, 4 years, 6 years, he said. So he's playing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and he stops. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and he stops. So we stopped the band and said, "Paul, by the way, when you play it goes da-da-da-da-da, and the bass goes boom, 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 so the bass never stops." He goes, "All right, mate, all right, let's try it again." So we start up the band. Everybody's looking at him like, "Yeah, boy, you got lucky that time." So we do it again, and we come to the bridge, and there's like 2 measures before you. "Let's go into a party. There's 2 measures of a 5-chord. Yes, we're going. And Paul jumped in 2 measures early. So at the end of that run through, I told him, I said, "Hey, Paul, by the way, you jumped the bridge 2 measures early, and now you got Edgar Winter, or Derringer, everybody looking across stage like, oh man, this guy just really stuck his neck in a noose." So Paul turns to me and goes, "I'll tell you what, mate." He says, "This time we'll do it again." He says, "You sing it, and I'll play bass, and I'll sort out what it is." So you talk about a surreal moment. I'm singing Birthday, the lead, and Paul McCartney is my bass player.
Unreal.
Yeah. So I got to tell Paul twice, no, that's not how it goes.
Your stories you got so many of them. The thing about that night that also blew my mind, that ranks as one of the greatest concerts I've ever seen. And
I agree.
All the other people who came out before the one song before Paul, if I remember correctly, you're the MD.
Help for My Friends.
Yeah.
You're correct.
And you had right before Paul was that tune. And I remember Jeff Lynne, I remember Brian Johnson, I remember Yoko.
You got it. Mick Jones, Yoko Ono. There were, I'll tell you who else, Gary Burr, let me think.
Nils, I think.
Nils. It was just like an ensemble, Colin Hay.
Oh, yeah, right.
Paul Carrick. trying to go back, Greg Lake. It was just insane how many people came up just to be a part. Who else was there? And he played drums. Second kid, I think.
I remember Zach was there that night too, actually.
Zach played drums, I'm sorry. But he didn't play drums, I'm sorry. It was Kellner. Jim Kellner was there.
Okay, right.
If I remember right, Kellner came up and sang backgrounds with a lot of us. But it was just insane. It was, again, Ringo's 70th birthday. Everybody was like there to kind of kiss the ring. And everybody just, it's funny talking about it. It just reminds me how lucky I am, man. How getting a call from Joe Walsh to lead a band with Paul McCartney and being on stage, sharing the moment with Ringo. Ringo, it took all of Barbara's effort to get Ringo to not walk off. Because he's like, I'm done with the show. Let's get out of here. There's a party they want me to go to. It's like, I have to go to a party. And she's like, no, wait a moment. And then they wheeled out a cake. If you remember, his grandsons brought a cake out.
Yeah.
He goes, oh, that's really special. It's lovely. It's lovely. Marzipan symbols. Oh, lovely. Let's get out of here. And Barbara's like, no, just wait one more minute. And all of a sudden, Paul's tech comes out with the bass.
The Hofner.
Exactly. And I'm looking over at the side of the stage, and I see Ringo's eyes. He's like a 7-year-old on Christmas Eve. And he runs out. And his drum tech had taken all the sticks off because I said to his tech, Jeff Jonas, I said, Jonas, I don't want anybody else just coming up and thinking they know how to play the song. I said, Bissonette's playing drums. I said, the only guy you give these sticks to is Ringo. And sure enough, Ringo ran up and said, where are my sticks? And Jeff gave him the sticks because it was a precautionary measure on my part. So it was just brilliant. I mean, to think about that, Paul and Ringo playing together, the two remaining Beatles on stage at that moment was just over the top. And then there I am, singing background, playing tambourine.
It was incredible.
Well, again, Dave, I'm still the same kid from Brooklyn.
I can hear it, cousin. I can hear it.
You know what I mean? Totally. And it's just so mind-boggling that I'm sharing a stage with my idols, my heroes, and they smile at me. And Ringo, and every time I see him, he's got a hug and a kiss for me. Oh, boys, how are your sons? It's just, you're really bringing some great memories to surface here, man.
Well, these are really, for me too, as a fan, as you can imagine, I don't have to tell you because you know what's out there for fans. That's really one of the great concerts. It does make me think, as you and I talk about that July 2010 experience at Radio City, he did do that other one, and I'm guessing, but I could be wrong from our discussion, that the Transcendental Meditation one, you were not part of when he and Paul did it. Okay.
No, I was not.
Okay, yeah, that looked interesting on video and stuff. And God, what's that director's name? I interviewed him right after that. David.
Not David. I know who you're talking about.
Damn, I can't. We're both spaced.
Lynch? No.
Yeah, David Lynch. Yeah, that's it.
David Lynch. How am I doing, huh?
Yeah, you're the man over there, brother. Helping each other.
My synapses are working good for a pretty old guy,
You're a very talented man. You got time for a couple more questions before I...
Sure, man. I'm actually enjoying this a great deal, Dave. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. The question I guess I have about lineups is, or two questions relating to lineups is, one, when you think of that experience you just ran through, is that the all-time greatest highlight of getting to do many, many, many tours with him, or is there another one that I don't think anything could rival that, but is there anything else?
Nothing will rival that 777, 77,
10.
You know what I mean? That to me was the greatest. And look, it's Paul McCartney and Ringo on stage together, and I'm putting it together. But when we played, one of my favorite bands that I had the pleasure of putting together was the band with Jack Bruce, Peter Frampton, and Gary Brooker, and Simon Kirke. Oh. It was a tight band, and the music was just never stopped. So that was one of my favorite groups. One of my favorite lineups. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how much I love playing. I'm sorry, if I didn't mention how much I love playing with Paul Carrack, who I think is one of the most talented people ever. Paul Carrack, Colin Hay was an absolute joy to work with. So I mean, it's really hard, but that absolutely stands out. I mean, and I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that the lineup that Billy put together at the last play at Shea, that rocked pretty hard when Paul came up and sat in with us there.
Right, you've had multiple. You've been fortunate enough to have your other gig bring you in contact with Sir Paul a few times.
Right, on a number of occasions. Yeah.
Right, a few times. I was going to say you've, and that does obviously the elephant question in the room would be: we never mentioned George. Was there ever an encounter?
Unfortunately, no. I never met George. I did get to meet Olivia once. We did a tribute for. It was very brief. I met her for Jim Capaldi, the drummer with Traffic. I was the MD for a band that featured Stevie Winwood, Bill Wyman. Pete Townsend played one song solo, but it was just like one of those wicks from McCartney, from Mac's band. I beg pardon, from Sir Paul's band. Played keyboards. That I just met her briefly, but the short answer, no, I never met George.
Hey, well, it's you've had an incredibly charmed career. It would just be irresponsible of me not to have figured that question in there.
I hear you, man.
And before I let you go, a thing about Ringo that's very special to me. Actually, two final notes before I let you go. You mentioned the music director thing again, and I'm hoping to do another interview with you in the future to explore more of that separate gift that you have. But the 12-12-12 show, what got you involved with that?
My involvement with 12-12-12 was very simple. Billy was
just doing his set.
To do it. I was free. I mean, I just come home from a gig. I drove home from a gig I did in Washington the night before to do a rehearsal. In fact, I was a stunt vocal. I sang 7 hours of Billy Joel songs for the band because we hadn't played together for 3.5 years. So I swear, Dave, I'm telling you, I sang 8 songs about 6 different times, and then about another 4 for some other. It was a long rehearsal because Billy wasn't at the first rehearsal. We rehearsed 2 nights for that show, man, and it was insane. It was a great show. Again. In my I don't do it often enough, but in my Facebook and on my webpage, I say I was blessed and humbled by Billy asking me to participate in, just to help the people, because that's was such a devastating storm, and the fact that they let me be a part of it, the healing process, I was blessed, and I'm very honored to have been a part of that. But that was just, we got together and played. We're like a great bar band. We go and know the songs.
Well, you've done two things. You've done a lot of charitable things and helped a lot of people out, and that's just part of your history. But the way that you're an asset to Billy's band, anyone who's seen you live, certainly I've seen you many times with Billy, and there's no question at all about what you bring to the table for that guy's band. My final question about Ringo's band is, and it's not really a question, it's kind of, I guess, just a statement. I'm sure you'll appreciate it because you've been there so many times. The thing if I ever do get to meet him, I think the first thing I would say to Ringo would be, Ringo, what's weird about you is you were the Beatles drummer, but yet your son has gone on to be this incredible gift. It's like, I don't know which to thank you more for what you did as part of the Beatles, and then continuing to share that with us in all these creative ways as a solo artist, or that your kid is such a stand-up, incredibly talented, wonderful drummer, and what a fill-in for Keith Moon. I mean, if anybody was going to do that gig, hello. It's like... No,
I'll tell you, Zach used to tell me stories, because the first tour that I did with Ringo, Zach was on, and I was really nervous. I mean, to meet Ringo, he made me feel really comfortable, but I didn't know what had happened in the past and who was, what buttons, and I wasn't the ND for the first 2 weeks or whatever it was. And Zach and I became fast friends. And I'd ask the questions, like, I remember saying, so I think I stuttered it out one time. So what was it like having a dad at the Beatles? He goes, my dad wasn't home. He says, but when he did get home, his friends would always come about. And he said that Keith Moon sent him a set of drums, like a 14-piece set of drums and cymbals everywhere, and he sent him a set of headphones. So Zach grew up probably like 7 or 10 years old playing all this stuff, all the Quadrophenia and all this insane Who stuff. And at the end of it all, he was the perfect drummer. He's a perfect fit. But the funny thing that Ringo finally told me after the fact, he goes, yeah, Tony sent these drums to me house, he goes, and then he sent me a bill for the frickin' things. But to tell you the truth, Zach was always blown away by Keith Moon. Zach wanted to be Keith Moon from the time he was a boy. And you couldn't be more correct. He's a perfect fit for the band. He's a brilliant, brilliant drummer. And every time I see him, I'm just overjoyed to have him as a friend. And we just call each other, yeah, my son, how are you, my son? We just give each other grief. But he's just a brilliant musician and a great guy. So he's a very, very, very dear friend. So if I see him, if I speak to him, I'll send him your regards.
Well, as you can tell, big fan.
I know.
Big fan of his work, and like I said, back to Ringo, it's really like, what a remarkable thing. It's almost like I wish John Bonham was around to say a similar thing, because Jason, in my opinion, I'm a drummer too, by the way.
No kidding.
I look at Jason as he just does I like his playing. He's soulful. He does a really nice little licks and stuff. I'm a simple guy like him, Cozy Powell, but the way he does his pops work, to me, the only thing I ever can think of is Zach, and the way that he doesn't replicate his dad at all, but like we said, he takes drumming very, very seriously. And he's a brilliant player. He really is, man. Look, talking to you is a joy. It's fun. I'm reminded how blessed I am, and anytime I get to share stories like this, as you can tell, I don't shy away from any of it. So you're going to be in Sydney? Yep.
I'll make sure that you have a way to get back to me, and that I'll do what I can. I never make promises as far as Mr. Starkey, because some days, if he's in a good mood, he'll give you his car, and if he's not in a good mood, he'll back over you with it. So just, you don't know, you want to be sure. A lot of times they don't tell him that he's got to do 4 phoners and he's got a group of people to meet. So I really am thoroughly respectful of his time, so I don't make promises with it, if you know what I mean.
Oh, dude, I wouldn't even expect to meet him. I mean, if you
never know.
If you make it happen, then I'm a solid guy. I'll do a good job with it, and I'll be prepared.
Sure you would. Look, I wouldn't have said it if I didn't feel that way. So
you're the king, Mark. I give you a big hug. And
I gotta say, Dave, it's an absolute pleasure, man, and thank you for reminding me how blessed I really am.
Oh, dude, you too. You're really easy to talk to, and thanks for the great stories. Look forward to seeing you in Sydney, buddy.
Likewise, much safe travels and much peace, brother.
Yep, I'll email you soon. You too. Thank you, Mark. Aloha.
You got it later. Aloha.